CM Sportsnet presents Sports Talk at Island Green.
Greetings and welcome to Sports Talk at the Island Green right here on Carroll Media Center. Avery Newport back once again with you, always with head coach of the McDaniel Green Terror football team, Skyler Fultz. Skyler, you didn't match with me today, man? No. We were matching last week. What the heck? Come on.
I want to go with something a little different today.
Come on. I need more football gear, man. I'm telling you.
We'll work on that.
Okay. We'll get that going next year's order, right?
Next year's, yep.
Okay, got it. Skyler Fultz here with us to talk about McDaniel's game this past weekend on the road at Dickinson, which was a loss, 24-0, the final score on the road. Conference showdown. Skyler, just quickly, right off the bat, give me your thoughts on how you thought last weekend's contest went for your team.
Yeah, I mean, it was the tale of two halves. You look at the first half, we were a couple plays away from possibly having the lead. The defense was playing real well. They were playing more of a bend, don't break. They were giving up some plays, but they were starting to lock it down. But when you really look at it, I mean, that was the first game where I really noticed the new clock rules this year where the clock keeps running because we were trying to run the ball. They were trying to run the ball. And we only had 3 possessions in the first half. And the third possession was us taking a knee to take it into half.
Right.
So those things don't typically happen. And when you look at the actual score at halftime and consider where it was, again, that's where we are kind of as a football team. We want to be in close games because we know we can compete with anyone. It just didn't go our way. And then the second half, I felt we kind of came out a little bit flat. We didn't start the second half the way we started the football game. We kind of spit and sputtered at some times. And then you look at defensively, a couple of issues we had. We had a couple of just missed tackles that led to some big plays. And in offense, we just couldn't get things going consistently, right? The old 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And that's what's going to end up leading in a game with the final score that looks like that, where you look at the halftime stats and you look at the halftime score, you're thinking this is going to be a close one all the way down to the end. And it just didn't go that way for us.
Well, I think the game was a lot closer than that score might indicate. Again, I mean, the defense all season has been the strong point of the team, and it again proved to be the strong point in this past weekend's contest. I mean, you saw another fantastic performance from true freshman linebacker Tavon LeGrande, who had 14 tackles on the game, also forced and recovered a fumble, I believe, as well. So he was super active, always on the ball on that end of the defense. And the other leaders on the defensive end stepped up, too, in a big way. Bailey Himes had 9 tackles and a tackle for loss as well. Malachi Murphy, who has 2 interceptions this year, second in the conference, had another good game, 9 tackles for him. So you had your upperclassmen leaders on the defense step up and play big, but you also had Tavon LeGrande continue his hot start to his freshman season. Talk a little bit about how those individual leaders on the defensive end were able to keep you guys in this game this weekend.
I mean, you mentioned Tavon. We talked about him last week a good bit. The funny thing is like you look at the stat sheet and he had a really, really good game. But when you actually sit back and watch the film, he left a lot of plays still out there, and he knows it because he very easily could have had a 20 tackle game with a couple more TFLs.
Right.
And that's just the youthfulness showing. So it's like you see the ability. It's just the youthfulness will kind of rear its head once in a while, which really makes you excited as a coach because if you're already playing at that level, what's going to continue to happen when you start getting even better and better. And then you mentioned some of the older guys like Malachi, Bailey, Alex Brown, those guys. They're solid football players. They're solid teammates, and they're consistent with doing their job, right? That's the one thing we've been preaching to everyone is just has to focus on doing their solo job each play, because if I do mine, you do yours, we have a chance to put everything together and everyone's doing a good job. Their communication's getting better and all the little things that you'd like to see as you're continuing to develop and learning the defense across the board.
I was also really impressed with how easily the defense was able to get into the backfield and slow down the rushing attack for Dickinson. Dickinson did outgain you guys on the ground, but you had 7 TFLs in this game and a sack as well from freshman nose tackle David R. So talk a little bit about how the defense and the front 7 in particular were able to get home and get in the backfield and make a couple of stops on that end.
Again, it's the same thing. It's a story of 2 halves, right? The first half, They're doing a fantastic job running the pressures when we called some blitzes, being in their gaps the way they're supposed to. And then you look at the second half, that's where I think the time of possession really paid against us, right? They started having some longer drives. Guys are having to play a little bit longer. And those ones where you're there in the first half to make the play, when it's a loss of one or a gain of nothing, and the second half you're a hair step slower, you're not quite there, they turn into 4 or 5 yard gains.
Right.
And next thing you know, it ends up being a longer drive. But when you look at it, when they do their correct job and they do it at the level of intensity and athleticism that they all have, you know how successful they can be. It's just about building that consistency.
Yeah, you talked about time of possession a little bit. Let's talk about that here coming up. So 37 minutes of time of possession for Dickinson, 22 for McDaniel. Of course, you maintain the ball for longer stretches of time by establishing the run game, right? And we've seen that for most of the season with Angel Granado, the starting quarterback, leading the way in terms of rushing attempts and yardage. But how do you continue to close that gap in time of possession and continue to establish the run moving forward?
Oh, one is you have to be better on third down. That's really the one that when you look at it, because it was funny for us. We sat back, and one of the challenges we had for the guys was to turn those 2-3 yard, 1 yard gains, ones where we weren't necessarily getting any yardage the weeks before, turn them into positive runs. And when you actually look at the called runs early on in the game, we were getting 4, we were getting 5. The problem was we got to third down a couple times. One penalty set us back to like 2nd and 15. Well, you get 6 yards, you're still looking at 3rd and 9, right? So we just kind of had a couple of those instances where we hurt ourselves, and really third down's the situation that gets you to be able to continue to do that, right? You can get 3 yards, you can get 3 yards, but if you're not great on third down, you're not going to continue the drive going forward. So it's a little bit, right? It's the old complementary football stuff, right? You want to throw the ball well, you better run the ball well to help the pass game. Well, you want to help the running game, you got to be able to throw the ball well. It's the whole game is intertwined, and that's a great example of it right there.
Yeah, I mean, that the old saying always goes that you have to establish the run first to set up the pass. Let's switch here and talk about the passing game a little bit. Angel Granado took all the snaps at quarterback this past weekend, was 8 of 19 through the air, 80 yards, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. What did you think of his performance? Obviously, the turnovers, we've talked about him before on the show. That's the number one thing that Angel's got to work on, right? Just keeping the ball in possession. But did you see any positives from him, especially on the ground? I mean, he had 18 carries on the ground, was the leading rusher on the day as well.
I mean, every play Angel takes is more experience, more knowledge, just building up, right? It's just like when you start building a computer. You start with the data and the memory, and you build things up. It's the same exact thing. Every rep he takes is all helping towards that. While I was watching the film with him earlier today, it's just little things, right? And moving in the pocket a little bit better. And then also the one thing, like everyone always looks at the interceptions and stuff. The one, I give credit to the kid from Dickinson. That was a fantastic catch.
Right.
The kid made a fantastic play. They hit it real well. It was a great call. That's one of those learning ones that I can really go back to Angel and be like, yes, he made a great play, but you also were trying to force something that might necessarily you don't need to in that situation, right? That's that growth that you're trying to look for, just being a little bit smarter with the football. So, I mean, with Angel overall, you're looking at, can he continue to build and develop and stack games? Because right now he's kind of riding the wave a little bit, right? He does a little bit of good here. Next play shows up a little bit of the youth and experience, and that's what's going to happen when you're playing a younger guy, year one within the offense, trying to learn things. So you try to continue to build the confidence on the good plays that he makes, and then make the ones that he knows, right? I don't need to harp on the interception being a bad. Right? He knows it's bad. He's going to be hard on himself. He's a competitor. It's one of the things I love about him. But it's also about making that be more of a learning situation, not so much as a hard correction.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think, again, as you mentioned, he knows that interceptions are bad, and you got to keep the ball, on your end for most of the game, especially if you want to try and win and put up some points. But I think you can't really tell just looking at the box score how he played, because, again, he is a first-year quarterback in a first-year system. Now, he obviously started the back half of last year, but really is like starting over this year, right? Because it's a whole new offense. You bring in a whole new set of plays and verbiage and everything, and that takes time to learn and develop. And I think some people, you can look at Division I football or pro football or the NFL, and you can see a quarterback get plugged in here or there, and it looks so easy. They just pick up the offense right away. But that transition isn't necessarily true at every level of football, especially at D3 football.
I mean, you kind of nailed it on the head. There's a couple things people don't realize, right? At Division III football, we don't wear pads all spring, so it's not real football all spring. So you're losing those reps that are normally good ones. At Division I schools, most of the time those players are there all summer.
Yeah.
Right. So all summer they're doing workouts. They're not necessarily with their coaches, but they're still on the field running the plays in shorts and t-shirts with their teammates. Yeah. They're still throwing the ball all summer. Meanwhile, Division III, for the most part, all of our guys go home on the summer. Right. So the work that they put in is on their own with high school teammates, with people that live locally and things like that. So you are missing some of those repetitions, and it does take a little bit of time. And also you look at last spring for us was really a get to know each other kind of situation. Yeah. We only had 50 some guys at spring ball. We were very, very like tilted one way or the other. So for us in spring, we only had, I think it was 12 practices. Yeah. So even with that, we're a little bit behind on the catch up. So when you really sit down, you go, can we continue to move in the right direction? Like I told the team today, right? You're planting seeds for the future harvest. Yeah. That future harvest could be this upcoming weekend. Everything you learned will get to that point. Or if you're a younger guy, it might take another year or two, but you have to continue to realize that it doesn't happen immediately. No. Sometimes you have to continue to work. You have to water the plants. You have to fertilize. You have to do all the little things right to make sure it continues to grow the direction you want it to. And you just have to keep reminding the guys that way.
Yeah, I mean, already you've made progress from a year ago because you won a game, right? Like that's already
that's true, yep.
That's already significant progress from where the program was, and you added over 30 new players to the team this year. I mean, there were 76 guys on the team a year ago, and there are over 100 now. So already there are significant areas of progress being made within the program, and it takes time to build on those areas of progress. You know, you've played, 5-6 games already this year, but that it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen a lot of times in a season either. It takes another year. It takes another off season, especially with the limitations of the Division III offseason. You need that extra time to really grow and develop with the players that you have.
Yeah, it's a process, and you try to remind the guys, and we live in a world right now that's very instant gratification. Like you're always focused on what's the next thing, how can I keep taking the next step forward, and it's hard. You have to remind them that you're building, you're developing, you're going through, right? Like when I played, I came in as a freshman quarterback, got hurt. I was about 200 pounds, and I ended up, I played tight end my senior year at 255, right? So you talk about development and change. Those things take time. That's not something you immediately can do. That took me 3.5 full years to really get that down. And you just have to remind the guys you're continuing to build, develop, lay the foundation, and eventually it starts paying off, right? You tell them we got the first win of the year because of the development that we made during camp, but now you're in the gauntlet of the Centennial Conference. You now know what it takes to continue to grow and develop to get the next win.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue because I was going to talk about the Centennial and how things are shaping up in the conference about halfway through the schedule here. Ursinus is at the top of the league standings right now. They're 2-0 in conference and 6-0 undefeated in the league this year. Very impressive start for them. They beat up on William Patterson 49-7 last week. Hopkins not far behind them at 5-1. But let's preview this upcoming weekend for you guys on the road. Your second straight road match at Franklin and Marshall. They were an 8-win team last year, but off to a bit of a slower start this year, just at 3-3 and 1-2 in the conference. They played in an absolute dogfight, slugfest against Hopkins this past weekend. Defensive battle from start to finish. 13-6, the final. Hopkins winning at home in that one. So the offense for Franklin and Marshall leaves a little to be desired this year, right? And I think that sets your defense up perfectly for another really stellar defensive performance on the road this weekend. What's the game plan so far? How are you looking to attack this Franklin and Marshall offense? And from your perspective as an offensive guy, what's the game plan looking like going into their defense?
I mean, the one thing with F&M, I played them last year at my previous school. We played them in the bowl game, and they're always extremely well coached, right? And they're not going to show up with a roster of 140 guys. They're going to be a lower number, but they're going to be well coached, well seasoned, and they're going to know the game plan real well. So our focus right now on our guys is the details of simple things: alignment, assignment, and then executing your job, right? right? When you're going against well-coached teams, and especially what we have in the Centennial Conference, you can't make those little mistakes. If you're misaligned by a couple of feet, that's a big difference that guy can now make that run that's going to get you 10 instead of you making the tackle for 3, right? Especially when you're going against an offense like F&M is extremely capable, right? They have some very, very good players, and they have the last couple of years done a great job. Their one wide receiver is phenomenal. He's been great the last couple of years. I didn't know he was hurt to start the year. He's now back. He's always a threat. So there are certain things that you have to remember when you're game planning. You have to know where their top talent is and then how to neutralize them. And it starts with doing your job first, right? Make sure you're aligned right. Make sure the guy next to you is aligned right. Everything has to start there to give you the best chance to win.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think this upcoming matchup bodes really well for your defense, especially because F&M struggling on the offensive end through most of the year so far. They're only averaging 18 points a game coming into this weekend's contest, but they play in a lot of low-scoring defensive battles as well. They're only giving up 14.5 points a game, 87 total points for the season through 6 games so far. So how do you stay close in a game that's when you're matching up against a team that's so strong defensively? What is the way to kind of, keep up with that low-scoring defensive pace that they've been on most of the season?
It's 2 things. It's field position and turnovers.
Yeah.
All right. When you're playing against a team that you think you can match up to, and you know it's going to be a dogfight all the way through, is can you win those 2 things? Now, the turnovers is easy, right? That's a very easy stat to see. Those aren't like hidden yards. The field position thing is the hidden yardage,
right,
because that can come in on everyone doing their job on punt, everyone doing their job on kickoff return, right? You don't want to give them the chance to start on the 35 or the 40. You want to make sure it's backed up, right? Those are the little things you have to do when you're going into a game where you're thinking, hey, this might be one that comes down to the 4th quarter in a low-scoring effort. You have to do those things right. So that's really our big harp on. Can we do the little things right in the hidden yardage game to make sure we're as balanced as we can be as an entire team?
Well, another thing that doesn't show up in the offensive stats, but that makes a huge difference in the field position battle, as you mentioned, is the return game. We've seen a number of excellent returns from Christian Homer this year, who's normally in the secondary as a cornerback and a safety, but he's been an excellent return man so far this year. And, of course, last game at home against Muhlenberg, he broke off a huge return early on in the first half that set you guys up with great field position deep in Muhlenberg territory. He's busted out a couple of great returns so far this year. So that's another aspect of the ball control and the field position game that you don't really see in the offensive stats, because it's not an offensive play, right? It's special teams. But when you have a great return man back there like Christian Homer, who can read the ball well, who can see the lanes in the kick return game and make something big happen for you that then sets up the offense in a good position, that really gets the offense going, doesn't it?
You nailed it on the head with that one. It's funny, though, when you have defensive guys on more offensive, I guess you could say, special teams, right? Kickoff return is the first play of offense.
Yeah.
So you talk to the defensive guys, well, if you're on kickoff return, you really want to help the offense. Here's the first play. Yeah. You're a part of the first play of our drive. It doesn't go down as a stat that way, but theoretically you are, because where we start with this football is based on you doing your job on this. Yeah. So it's really interesting when you see the guys from the other side of the ball playing those things. It's just like if we're punting the football, right, and a defensive guy's on punt, hey, this is a first play of defense. Right. You want them to be as far back as possible. Yeah. You do your best on this one, and that's how you get the guys to buy in, and you have crossings. That's why you don't have just offensive guys on kickoff return or just defensive guys on kickoff. Yeah. Right? It's everyone doing their job, knowing that it goes back to that complementary football. Every piece is interconnected, that if everyone's doing their job, we have a really good chance of being successful.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the turnovers as well, too, and the turnovers have been arguably the best strength of the team this year. You have 11 combined turnovers, which is the best number of any team in the Centennial Conference through 6 games. And that's really impressive, considering that you're starting a lot of young guys, and a lot of underclassmen are playing important roles on the defensive side, like Tavon LeGrande. We've talked about him already. He's just a freshman, but he's the starting middle linebacker, and he's anchoring that defense. But you have 11 turnovers already, and that's really saying something, considering that you've got great defenses in this league, like Johns Hopkins, like F&M, like Dickinson, the team you just played last weekend. So talk about how those turnovers, I know you mentioned it a little bit, but kind of elaborate a little more on how you've been so successful at getting turnovers and how that continues to be a recipe for success for your defense.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the defensive coaches first when it comes to this, right? It's one of those things that has to start from the top. You have to make an emphasis of practicing those things, right? Practicing trying to strip a fumble, make sure you're practicing ball drills and things like that. Coach Piercy and the rest of the defensive staff have done a phenomenal job driving that point home since preseason camp.
Yeah.
So it starts with that, and then it moves down, but it also is, a lot of it's also effort. Right? It's the close. If you want to get a fumble, you have to be near the football, right? So it starts with giving the immense effort to put yourself in the position to get the ball. Yeah. Then you can use those skills and those things that we developed and practice, right? The strip fumble, right? Making sure you're making the correct break on the ball. All that's done in individual drills and practice. But sometimes it just comes down to that level of care and enthusiasm to just be around the football, right? Good things happen when you're near the football when you're on defense.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. But it really started all the way back at preseason, even in spring ball, really driving the point home of we're not going to just sit back and let the game come to us, right? We want to dictate the football game. We really want to make the offense play a little bit more on the passive side because they have to be leery of, they're not sure where we're going to come from, who's going to be in what position, so we can try to come away with a couple of those takeaways.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also going back to the point that we first talked about, being in your first year as head coach, the first year under a new offensive system, I think it works the opposite way with the defense, right? Because Coach Piercy now has been here for 2 years. Now that he has a full year under his belt as the defensive coordinator, his guys are used to his system. They're used to playing in it. They've had another full year of practice as well. So I think that really benefits the defense, and you can see the benefits are reaping the rewards on the field by getting the turnovers, by being in the right spot at the right time, by filling up the gaps as well. I think that extra year and that extra knowledge of Coach Piercy's system has really helped them on the defensive end, and I can only expect the same sort of transition to happen under your second year, too, on the offensive side.
Yeah, that's the goal, right, is to continue to grow and develop. And the defensive guys have done a great job of working hard and making sure they understand and really understand the game plan, right? Yeah. Like, it's one thing to learn during camp, like, this is how we're trying to run this is how we're trying to do this. But in defense, a lot of it's reactive. You have to, here's the call, but what are you going to do if they come out in this formation? What are you going to do if they motion this guy? And those are the adjustments that the defensive guys really have to lock in, and they've done a really, really good job of that.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly excited to see how the defense continues to mature and develop and continue to play in Coach Piercy's system because, again, this upcoming weekend is a great opportunity for them to continue to show their improvement and their growth this year against an F&M offense that doesn't score a ton of points. I think this is a great opportunity for them to really establish themselves in the conference as among the best defensive units in the Centennial.
That's the goal, right? You want to continue to challenge those guys. I mean, you look, we sat here 2 weeks ago talking about the challenge we were going to face against Muhlenberg. The guys really stepped up, and then it got away from us there at the end. But then you look, Muhlenberg scored 58 again this past weekend. Right? So that's what you're trying to do, is continue to challenge the guys to not only be good, but try to grow to be great, and that's really what we're pushing them to do.
Skyler, any parting words for our opening segment here today? Anything you want to say before the contest at
No, I appreciate it, right? And like I said before, we're continuing to grow, continue to develop, and couldn't give a better praise and push for the way the players are acting, the way they're showing up every day at practice, and just continue to grow and develop. The young guys are at that point in the year, right, where you're about halfway through your freshman season, and you're getting a little tired. You had midterms, and they're doing a really good job coming every single day, focused, ready to work, and I couldn't be prouder of them.
Yeah, excited to see the continued growth of the team. Obviously, the offense is still a work in progress, but the defense has shown a ton of potential. And I think this game is going to be really interesting again, because I think the defense has the capability and the awareness of the ball, too, to get some turnovers, to keep this game interesting. And, of course, the offense just got to keep making those positive strides, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's the goal, man. One day at a time.
Coach Skyler Fultz of the Green Terror football program, my guest as always. Skyler, thanks so much for coming on, and best of luck to you this weekend.
Appreciate it. Go Green Terror.
We'll take a quick break and come back for segment 2 with Trystin O'Brien, treasurer of the Century High School Booster Club. After this is Sports Talk at the Island Green. Back in a bit.
Catch all the high school football action with CM Sportsnet's Game of the Week. From kickoff to the final score and all the plays in between, we've got you covered.
Here's our next matchup.
Don't miss CM Sportsnet's Game of the Week.
My name's Cooper Sheeler. I'm a senior at Winters Mill, and I'm here interning at the Community Media Center. I recently saw this opportunity because I was playing football over at Winters Mill, and I saw the Community Media Center filming and broadcasting a couple of our games. So I thought that was a really cool way to connect with the community, and I really wanted to be a part of that. Pretty much what I do throughout the day is I help with graphics throughout their game on segments and game of the week, and I also help out prepare stats for all the seasons, the spring and the winter and the fall. I update all of those, and I pretty much go around and I can just help out. I can help out at games when they're preparing for a game of the week. I've done a couple podcasts here at Community Media Center. I would highly recommend people come in here for an internship. It's a lot of fun. The people that work here are really nice, and you get to experience a lot of cool things that you've probably never done before.
Skill, dedication, leadership. Just a few of the things it takes to be named CM Sportsnet's Athlete of the Week. Hi, I'm Pat Stetzer. Each week, CM Sportsnet recognizes an outstanding player for their contribution to their sport. Meet some of Carroll County student athletes and join us as we celebrate their performance, impact, and outstanding accomplishments.
CM Sportsnet Athlete of the Week is brought to you by Barnes Bollinger Insurance and by Raising Cane's.
Hey there, I'm Pat Stetzer.
And I'm Michael Duffy, inviting you to join us for The Score and more.
Each week, we'll talk about high school sports in Carroll County. We'll share information about upcoming games, highlight coaches and athletes, and much more.
We'll even try to have a little fun along the way. Don't miss The Score and More podcast, presented by CM Sportsnet.
The Score and More Sports podcast is available online at carrollmediacenter.org and on a variety of podcast channels.
Brought to you by Farmers and Merchants Bank.
Trystin O'Brien, the head booster for the Century High School Boosters Club, is our guest for segment 2 on Sports Talk at the Island Green. Trystin, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So we were talking a little bit off the air before we came on about how your soccer teams are doing. They're doing really well this year. Tell me a little bit about how they've been performing. They just won the county championships, right?
Yeah, so both our boys and girls soccer team are county champs. They went undefeated against every other team in the county. So yeah, and they're going to playoffs next week, so we're super excited to see how far they go.
Yeah.
They normally do really, really well, so it's exciting.
That's awesome. And again, it's great too to have such a competitive and fun team, because it gets the whole community, rallying around them, and you get a lot of support and attention. And I'm assuming that's really what you deal with a lot as the treasurer of the Boosters Club. Can you kind of explain what your role is and how it impacts the programs?
Sure. So basically, I am in charge of all of the funds that are coming in and going out, making sure that we have things moved around and allocated for specific team needs. If our athletic director, Ashley, needs something, we know what we need to do to make that happen.
Got it. I see. So you're really involved in a lot of the behind-the-scenes financial, support
Correct.
of the programs in that way. Do you, as a booster, how involved are you with the on-field or the on-court product of what Century, puts out for all the other teams?
So myself, I'm fairly involved. I'm also the concessions manager, so I'm literally at every single game.
Nice.
Every single home game. And I work with the coaches and the team moms, and I see all the parents and the kids, so I can kind of get a feel of what they need, what's coming up. We do a rotational uniform purchase for the team so that everyone is constantly getting new uniforms as needed.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
What is the rest of the Booster Club made up of, and what is your goal as an organization to try and support Century's athletic teams?
So we have a regular executive board. So we have president, vice president, treasurer, and then a secretary. And then we have at-large members who are any parent that wants to join and help with whether it's fundraising or getting business sponsors, which is a large portion of our income every year. And we really are just facilitating funds to the athletic department for basically everything that is needed for every single team that we support.
That's great. So is your membership mostly made up of current parents of students that are playing sports at Century, or is it made up of alumni or teachers? What makes up the membership?
It is made up of almost 100% of current student athletes' parents.
I see.
Yeah.
Got it. Cool. So that really, I think, lends a good advantage to your group then, because everyone in the Boosters Club gets to see the day-to-day, gets to see their kids playing for all of their games, and are very involved with how the current state of Century athletics look. And I think that definitely bodes well for you guys, because you're seeing it every day and you're involved in the program all the time. And if you're an alumni or a teacher or something, you might not be as connected with all the current happenings of the athletic program.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Interesting.
It's definitely. I've been doing it for 6 years, but when I first started, it was this huge eye-opening experience of I had no idea how high school sports had worked.
Yeah.
So now I'm kind of like, oh, well, I know how it works now, but I'm also able to talk to parents and explain how things work behind the scenes so that they can get a better understanding of who we are as the Boosters and what our goals are every single year.
Yeah. So do you like how the athletic program is developing, is continuing in the 6 years that you've been in this role? Have you seen a lot of growth and progress from Century?
Yes, I have. I think that we have really great core coaches for all of our sports who come back year after year. So like our coaching turnover is really, really low, which helps keep kids that are incoming exciting to play, because they're like, oh, this guy's going to be my coach, or she's going to be my coach.
There's no uncertainty about it.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
Exactly.
So, and for the most part across the board, all of our programs are growing in numbers within probably like the last 3 to 4 years, which is amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
Yeah, I think it's great too, because again, as you mentioned off the air, that you just had a game of the week on CMC just recently, and for your football program as well. I got to see your team play and win a game against Winters Mill a couple of weeks ago when you played at our field at McDaniel. So, and that game had a tremendous crowd, I got to say. It was really fun and really, really cool to be a part of that experience, because it was right during the hurricanes that were coming through, and your field wasn't available, and so you had to come to McDaniel, and you played a game in our stadium, and you still had a full crowd there. I mean, it was just like you were playing at your home field, and instead, you're playing at a different venue. It was a rescheduled game, all this kind of chaos around it before, but you still had a great crowd. You still had all the fans show up and support, and I think that really says a lot about your program and how things are running smoothly at Century, that even on a whim, you can get your whole fan base to come to a different venue and still show up and support your team as fervently as they did.
Yeah, I think our student body is really excited for how well all of our sports teams are performing right now. So they're excited just to be able to watch them play. And you can kind of feel that anytime anything happens on the field, they're, screaming and cheering, which is a lot of fun to see.
Yeah, exactly. So as the treasurer of the Booster Club, what is a goal that you had coming into this athletic season in 2024? And if you could, if it doesn't, infringe too much, do you think you've met that goal? Or are you on pace to meet it at some point in the year? Just what is the biggest goal that your organization has for this year?
So one big goal we had coming into this year was to purchase a retractable net to put behind the goalposts to block like soccer balls, footballs, lacrosse balls.
Sure.
So we're actually getting ready to purchase that in the next week or two. So we've raised the funds to cover that. And then another huge expense that will be an expense every year is our field maintenance. We would love to replace it, but that's, hundreds of
that's pretty penny.
thousands
Right.
of dollars. So we're slowly working towards doing as much as we can to make it as usable, regardless of weather conditions, for as long as possible.
Sure. Well, it is such it's a difficult thing, really, because you can't control the weather, right? And you can't control when those things happen. And then when they do, it's tough to put a contingency plan together. And thankfully, I was super happy to be a part of the game that you guys played at McDaniel Stadium a couple of weeks ago. And I'm glad that everything worked out because it was, as I said, it was a great environment and everything worked out, for the circumstances, being a postponed game and everything. But yeah, eventually you'd like to get to that point, right? And the fact that you're making that progress and that you might not be all the way there yet, but again, it's a lot of money to maintain a field like that, or to install like new turf, or to get grow new grass or anything like that. That takes a while, and the fact that you're progressing towards that point, I think, is a good sign of where your program is going, and also the support that you're getting, the fact that it's even in the conversation that you can have those talks to maybe improve the field conditions so you don't have to have any postponements or anything like that. I think that's a great sign that things are really progressing in the right direction.
Yeah, and that's a huge thanks to the parents at our school, the local businesses that continuously support us year after year. Like, we wouldn't be able to do anything if it wasn't for them.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, so I'm curious about the local business aspect. So, of course, whenever you go to a high school football game or basketball or soccer or whatever other sport, there are always banners that are hung up of all the local businesses around. So if you could you explain a little bit of the impact that those local businesses have on supporting your programs?
Yeah, so the banner sponsors from the businesses in our community is probably like a 35% portion of the income that we bring in every year, which, is no small amount of funds. And that really covers the cost of what we spend a year for field maintenance, which is normally between $18,000 and $25,000.
Wow, interesting. So it really does make a big impact.
Yeah, we have so many, multiple teams that use the field. It helps buy dirt for softball and baseball fields, and whatever is needed field-wise. Normally, most of that money goes towards that.
Yeah, well, I think that's an interesting point, and that actually answers a couple questions for me, because field maintenance is even a challenge for us at the college level, right? Like we have a whole grounds team, and we have multiple people that have different hands in making sure all of our fields are in suitable playing condition, and we have a couple fields that are in great position to play on because of all the work that they put in. And so, but that money needs to come from somewhere, right? You have to have that support. You have to have somebody to be able to donate the funds so you can keep those fields in good working order. And I really wasn't even aware about how impactful those local businesses were in moving those things forward.
Yeah, I mean, we could not survive without them.
Yeah,
honestly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So really, I think this has been very enlightening for me, honestly, because I like to see how the behind the scenes things work. I mean, I've covered high school sports for many years. I worked in West Virginia for a long time, and I covered the high school teams in the Eastern Panhandle of that state. So I got to see the on-court and the on-field product a lot of times, but it's interesting to take a look back and to see how the things move behind the scenes, especially now, since I'm at the college level and I can see that from a Division III perspective and see how now it works at the high school level too.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. So I think before we wrap up here, Is there anything you want to say about how Century's been doing so far this year, about the support you've gotten from the fans, and anything else you'd like to see from your teams as the fall semester sort of winds down?
So as far as the sports teams, we're getting ready to go into playoffs. I know cross country has their counties are tomorrow, so they were practicing for that today, and they've all done extremely well. Like I don't know how much better they could improve. Like every team is better or at the same level as they were last year, which is what you can hope for.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's great, really. And again, that the county championships for cross country, by the way, at McDaniel College. Don't mean to toot our horn too much here, but that's great. That really is wonderful, and it's great to see that you're progressing towards something even bigger and better, right? That's what we've talked about with everyone from the local Carroll County high school scene that's come on the show the last couple of weeks, is that there's always, progression to something bigger and better, and even things are good right now, but there's always ways to improve and always things to get better at. And so I think that just in talking to you the last couple of minutes and in having seen some of your teams play already this year, I can definitely see that there's progression in a lot of those key areas, and I wish the best for you guys moving forward.
thank you.
Trystin O'Brien, the lead treasurer for the Booster Club at Century High School, our guest here in segment 2. Trystin, thanks so much for coming on and talking a little bit about Century.
Thank you for having me.
We'll take a break and come back for segment 3 of Sports Talk at the Island Green. Just me at the table to talk about Maryland sports at large in a moment. We'll take a break and come back after this.
Catch all the high school football action with CM Sportsnet's Game of the Week. From kickoff to the final score and all the plays in between, we've got you covered.
Here's our next matchup.
Don't miss CM Sportsnet's Game of the Week.
My name's Cooper Sheeler. I'm a senior at Winters Mill, and I'm here interning at the Community Media Center. I recently saw this opportunity because I was playing football over at Winters Mill, and I saw the Community Media Center filming and broadcasting a couple of our games. So I thought that was a really cool way to connect with the community, and I really wanted to be a part of that. Pretty much what I do throughout the day is I help with graphics throughout their Game On segments and Game of the Week, and I also help out prepare stats for all the seasons, the spring and the winter and the fall. I update all of those, and I pretty much go around and I can just help out. I can help out at games when they're preparing for a game of the week. I've done a couple podcasts here at Community Media Center. I would highly recommend people come in here for an internship. It's a lot of fun. The people that work here are really nice, and you get to experience a lot of cool things that you've probably never done before.
Skill, dedication, leadership. Just a few of the things it takes to be named CM Sportsnet's Athlete of the Week. Hi, I'm Pat Stetzer. Each week, CM Sportsnet recognizes an outstanding player for their contribution to their sport. Meet some of Carroll County student athletes and join us as we celebrate their performance, impact, and outstanding accomplishments.
CM Sportsnet Athlete of the Week is brought to you by Barnes Bollinger Insurance and by Raising Cane's.
Hey there, I'm Pat Stetzer.
And I'm Michael Duffy, inviting you to join us for The Score and more.
And each week we'll talk about high school sports in Carroll County. We'll share information about upcoming games, highlight coaches and athletes, and much more.
We'll even try to have a little fun along the way. Don't miss The Score and More podcast presented by CM Sportsnet.
The Score and More Sports podcast is available online at carrollmediacenter.org and on a variety of podcast channels.
Brought to you by Farmers and Merchants Bank.
Back here for Sports Talk at the Island Green. Just me, Avery Newport, at the table for our final segment today to talk about Maryland sports as a whole. I'm getting kind of lonely up here. I'm not going to lie to you. I got to have we got to get somebody from the Ravens or somebody from Maryland to come up here and talk shop with us eventually. That's in the works. We'll think about that for future shows. But for now, it's just me at the table. A couple big events happening in Maryland sports over the last couple of days, and there's another big one happening tonight on Monday Night Football. The Baltimore Ravens on the road at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for one of two Monday Night Football games tonight. That's going to be a huge game. That's certainly an understatement, but this might be the biggest test that the Ravens will have at this point in the season. They came off of a 30-23 win against the Commanders last week at home. They had an extra day to rest and prepare for the Bucs on the road. It's going to be a tough game. Really is going to be a tough game because talked a little bit about it last week as well, and we can elaborate a little more on it here. But the Ravens' defense has definitely left a little to be desired in 2024. They got off to a rough start against the Chiefs and Raiders in the first two games of the season. They were able to right the ship a little bit. You know, they got the win on the road against the Cowboys, and they beat the Bengals, too, on the road in Cincinnati before taking care of business last week against Washington. But even in that win against the Commanders, they gave up 23 points. Jaden Daniels had another good game on the road, and Daniels, unfortunately, left yesterday's game against Carolina with a rib injury. Didn't play much in that one. Marcus Mariota was able to fill in pretty admirably for him and throw 2 touchdown passes in a big win for Washington. But I think, if anything, that win looks even better for the Ravens now, considering how good Washington looks. I mean, again, a 40-7 win over the Carolina Panthers, who are now 1-6, doesn't look all that impressive. But I think it shows that the Commanders can beat a team that they should beat, and they beat them pretty soundly. And that team looks legit to me. I mean, again, it's only 7 games into the season at this point, and they still have half the schedule left to go. But Washington's 5-2, and they're in position to be among the top teams in the NFC if they continue to keep this up. And certainly if Daniels doesn't miss a significant chunk of time with that rib injury. So I think that win looks a lot better for the Ravens in retrospect now, considering how good Washington looked this past weekend against Carolina. But this is going to be a tough test against Tampa Bay, no doubt about it. Baker Mayfield had a resurgent year last year. In my opinion, I think he should have won the Comeback Player of the Year award, given how poorly he played for Carolina and the Rams in 2022. The Bucs got him on a cheap 1-year contract in free agency, and he absolutely balled out of his mind. I mean, he started every game. He threw for over 4,000 yards. I think he should have won the Comeback Player of the Year award last year, and I can't be too mad because they gave the award to Joe Flacco, who, of course, as a longtime Ravens fan, I certainly respect and admire him and how he led the Browns to the playoffs last year. But I think given the sample size and given the complete improbability of Baker Mayfield's season last year, I thought he should have won it. And he's proving so far through 6 games in 2024 that it's not a fluke, that he's here to stay and that he's among the best quarterbacks in the NFC, if not the league at this point. He still has a turnover problem here and there. He still throws the ball to the other team a little too much. But he still can put up those gaudy stats and those gaudy passing numbers. He's got a great receiving core around him. Mike Evans, of course, the veteran, who's had 1,000 yards in every season of his NFL career. I believe he's the only receiver in NFL history to have 10 straight seasons to start a career with 1,000-plus receiving yards. So just, bona fide Hall of Famer, in my opinion, is Mike Evans. Great fantasy receiver as well. Chris Godwin, the leading receiver in the National Football League this year. I think that's certainly been a surprising development. He had a great year last year. He's had some good seasons as well with Tom Brady as his quarterback before Mayfield came into the fold, and was on the Super Bowl winning team for the Bucs in 2020. Has a couple 1,000-yard seasons under his belt as well. But he's gotten off to an absolutely torrid start in 2024. The leading receiver in the league. I made a trade for him on my fantasy team this year, which has proven to be a pretty shrewd move, in my opinion. So the Bucs offense has been absolute dynamite through the first 6 games of the year. They put up 50 points on the road last week against the Saints. So they're looking legit in my book. And again, the NFC is as wide open as it basically always is. I mean, you have the Commanders, of course, who I mentioned, who are off to a good start. But beyond that, the NFC, I mean, you have the NFC North, of course. All 4 NFC North teams are in a position at this point to make the playoffs. We saw a bit of a slow start from the Bears and number 1 overall pick Caleb Williams to start the year, but he's found his footing. They got a big win on the road against the Jags last week, and they're continuing to build up that momentum. It took a little while for him to get his feet under him at the NFL level, but Williams looks great in his last couple of games, and that offense has a bunch of talent at the skill positions as well. So the Bears are great. The Lions, of course, the runners-up in the NFC last year and likely to be in a similar position this year at year's end. Even though they lost Aiden Hutchinson for the year with a leg injury, they still look as good as ever. They got a last-minute win against the previously undefeated Vikings this past weekend on the road, 31-29. And the Vikings, too, even though they lost this past weekend, came into that game undefeated. Sam Darnold has maybe been the story of the NFL season at this point. And then the Packers, of course. The Packers are always competitive with Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs and their whole little fun group of young wide receivers as well. So the NFC North looks great. But beyond that, the rest of the conference doesn't look all that impressive, in my opinion. You've got the Commanders in the NFC East, the Bucs in the NFC South, and really the entire division of the NFC North. But the NFC West has been extremely underwhelming, in my opinion. The 49ers have had well-documented struggles so far this season, and they might have just lost Brandon Ayuk to an ACL injury for the season yesterday in the loss against the Chiefs. So the NFC West teams don't look all that good. The Rams off to a slow start. The Seahawks were 3-0 at one point, and they've lost a couple games as well. The Cardinals can be very erratic with their offense and their defense just kind of failing to show up at some points. So that whole division really is very wide open to me, and I don't think any of those teams are going to be, come season's end, at the top of the standings in the NFC. So, believe it or not, I think the Bucs are in really good position here at this point to continue their successful run so far this year and stay atop the NFC South standings, if not the conference as a whole. I mean, again, the defense is not as good as the offense for the Bucs, but I think they can take advantage of a weak conference this year, and as long as they can get through the NFC North teams, they will be among the best teams in the conference. So it's a very long-winded way of saying this is a very important game for the Ravens tonight on the road. Also considering the fact that the Tampa area was hit by not one but 2 major hurricanes in the last handful of weeks. And this is the Bucs' first home game since Hurricane Milton passed through the Tampa area. So I think that team's going to be playing for a lot more than just a win against a good Ravens team. There's a lot at stake for the residents, for the people in that area. They want to see their home team win and kind of galvanize that city after such a horrific couple of weeks for them. So there's a lot at stake here for the Ravens. We've seen the offense really come alive in the last couple of weeks. Lamar Jackson certainly regaining his MVP form. Derrick Henry, among the best running backs in the league. There was a little bit of concern that he might fall off this year since this is his age 30 season, but he has shown no signs of decline so far through 2024, still busting off huge runs in almost every game he's played this year. Had another 100-yard performance against Washington a couple weeks ago. So he's still right at the very top of the upper echelon of NFL running backs this year, and he's proving to be every bit as valuable as his free agent contract suggests he is after the Ravens signed him to a 2-year deal in the offseason. The offensive line has also really taken a step forward as well. They've paved a lot of ground for Henry to run through opposing defenses. And at the beginning of the year, that was a struggle. Lamar Jackson was getting sacked a lot, was constantly being pressured in the pocket, having to make plays outside of the pocket on his feet. And, of course, he's got that dynamic ability to make plays happen on the ground, but I think he wants to establish his presence in the pocket more, and he can't do that with an offensive line that struggled the way the Ravens did in the first couple of weeks. But they've really turned the corner, I think, and I think they got a couple more games under their belt. They were able to survive a couple of shootouts as well over the last few weeks. So I think the offensive line has certainly improved. And the Ravens, their bread and butter is relying on the run game. If they can establish the run early and get Derrick Henry in some good situations early on in the first quarter, then I think they'll be set in this game. Again, the Bucs defense is nearly not as good as their offense is. So I think this has a chance to be a shootout. Again, we've seen the defense for both teams kind of have a shaky start to this year. So there's a chance this might be a very high-scoring and very entertaining game on Monday Night Football. But that's enough Ravens talk. We'll cover the Terps here quickly, and then we'll send you off on a high note. The Maryland Terrapins winning their homecoming game this past Saturday at home against the USC Trojans. That's right, Southern California as a Big Ten team playing a conference game against Maryland. If you had told somebody that 10, 15 years ago, they would have called you crazy. But that's the reality we're in 2024. That's the college football world that we're living in right now. But a great win for Maryland after a disappointing couple of weeks, losing on the road against Indiana, who at this point might be one of the best teams in the conference. They're still undefeated. They certainly have a chance at the Big Ten title, the Hoosiers do, under first-year head coach Curt Cignetti. So that loss doesn't look as bad in hindsight, but not a good one for the Terps on the road. And then, of course, the Friday night home game before this past weekend, losing at home in embarrassing fashion to Northwestern, 37-10. I got to be honest, as a Maryland alum, I got my master's degree in College Park last year. Didn't have high hopes for the Terps coming into this game against USC, even though the Trojans were themselves struggling to begin their first season in Big Ten play. It's USC. USC has tremendous pedigree. They're among the most storied programs in all of college football, even though they're struggling to start this season. And I didn't have faith in the Maryland defense. The defense has certainly been the weakest link for the Terps so far this year. The offense has had some pretty impressive performances through the first couple of games this year. Billy Edwards has had multiple 300-yard passing games his first year as the Terps starting quarterback. Ty Felton is among the leading receivers in all of the country and had another great game against USC. So the offense has certainly had bright spots throughout the year, but the defense has really lagged behind the offense so far to start 2024. But the defense held their own, and they held USC to a point where Maryland could win that game in the fourth quarter, and they did. Billy Edwards scored on a close rushing touchdown with 53 seconds left to go in the game to win 29-28. Huge win for Maryland. Just absolutely cannot state enough how big that win is for the Terps, just because that's a marquee program that they beat. Even though USC is not having a great year this year, I think you can credit that to a couple different things. They're playing in a new conference. They're playing in new environments that they're not used to playing in yet. They're used to playing on the West Coast in L.A. and in sunny Los Angeles with great weather year-round. And now they're having to go to Columbus, Ohio, and to Evanston, Illinois, and to Bloomington, Indiana, and to play all these teams when the weather gets cold. And, it's not fun to play football in the Midwest in November and December every year, and they're just finding that out right now. So they've got to make those changes, and I think for that reason, USC has not lived up to the preseason hype that they had coming into the Big Ten. But Maryland's a team that wins 7-8 games every year. They don't really have the expectations that USC has, and certainly not for this season either. Talia Tagovailoa, the longtime starting quarterback for the Terps, graduated. He's now playing in the Canadian Football League. So there's a lot of turnover for the Terps, and I don't think anyone expected them to keep up with that 7-8 win pace that they've been on the last few years. But this is a big win for this Maryland program. It really is. And Coach Mike Locksley always says that Maryland's not trying to compete for a 6 or 7 or 8 win season. They want to compete for Big Ten championships and for national championships. And to do that, you've got to beat programs of prominence. And USC, despite having a poor start to the year this year, are among the best programs in the country. I mean, the Heisman Trophy winners, the national championships, the NFL quarterbacks they've developed over the years. It speaks for itself, it really does. USC is right up there with the Alabamas and the Texases and the Ohio States and the Notre Dames as being one of the best programs in the country throughout the history of college football. So that's important in my book. I mean, Maryland, I can't think of the last time that the Terps beat a team of this stature in terms of the historical significance of the program. They certainly didn't have any of those wins when they were in the ACC. And in the last 10 years or so of the Big Ten, they haven't had many either. They've mostly lost to the Ohio States and the Michigans and the Michigan States and the Penn States every year too. I mean, Maryland-Penn State technically is a rivalry, but Penn State almost always dominates that matchup every year. So Maryland needed a win like this for their program if they really want to compete at a higher level that they've said they've wanted to compete at for many years at this point. You need to beat a team like USC, whether they have 6 wins and no losses or 3 wins and 3 losses. USC is a marquee program, and beating them is a big step for Maryland, regardless of current happenings within the program. And the fans stormed the field. I mean, I can't remember the last time the crowd stormed the field at a Maryland football game. It's been ages. I mean, my mom went to Maryland. She's in attendance tonight, and she could probably tell you the last time that a crowd stormed the field at a Maryland football game when she went there in the 80s. So it's been a long time, and I can't definitively pick out the last time it happened, but it's been a long time for Maryland. And so I think the fans deserve to celebrate a win like that on homecoming against USC, against a marquee program, and a close, fun, competitive game, too. I mean, Billy Edwards scored the game-winning touchdown with under a minute to go in a 29-28 win, just a one-point win at home. Like, that's fun. And you beat USC. I think you have every right to go ahead and celebrate the way they did. So very happy for Maryland. Hope they can continue to keep up this momentum that they've built now from beating USC. It shows that these Pac-12 schools that have come into the fold into the Big Ten this year are vulnerable. And I think they're still trying to get used to playing in a new conference and playing against new teams and in different environments. And I think Maryland can certainly take advantage of that. It's not going to help because they've got Oregon on the schedule coming up in a couple weeks, who's the number one team in the country right now. Their schedule certainly isn't going to get any easier, but I think a win like this certainly proves that the Terps are capable of beating those marquee programs, and I hope that it really marks a turning point for the program moving forward. So that's my 2 cents on Maryland football. Very happy for them and hope they continue to keep up this success. But we'll talk a little bit about Major League Baseball playoffs, and then we'll call it a night. The World Series is set. The Dodgers and the Yankees will face off in the Fall Classic for the 2024 championship in Major League Baseball. And I got to say, I'm always a fan of the underdog. I got to be honest. Last year with the World Series having the Texas Rangers and Arizona Diamondbacks, I was thrilled because these are two teams that came into the playoffs as lower seeds, no expectations, not much historical success either. So that was a very cool matchup. And this year is the complete opposite of that in every way. I mean, the Dodgers and Yankees are always the two highest spending teams in baseball. Their payrolls are always north of $300 million a year. They always have the marquee players in the sport as well. You got to start with Aaron Judge and Juan Soto for the Yankees, Garrett Cole as well, the starting pitcher for the Yanks, the reigning Cy Young winner. And then the Dodgers, of course, they have just an absolutely stacked lineup from top to bottom. You got to start with Shohei Ohtani, of course, who's probably going to win the NL MVP this year, had 54 home runs, the first 50-50 season in the history of baseball, which for a sport that's been around for a billion years is very impressive, that he's still the guy to do the first thing ever that's happened in baseball. So they got Shohei Ohtani, they've got Mookie Betts, who's missed a good chunk of this season with injuries, but he's back and healthy now. Freddie Freeman, of course, just a stalwart at first base as well. So that lineup is just loaded from top to bottom. It's really going to be a fun matchup. I'm not a Yankee guy, of course. I'm an Oriole guy. Born and bred, I've always been an Oriole fan, always will be. But I think there's something to be said for the two best teams in the sport duking it out for the championship. It's always fun to have the underdog matchup every now and then, just to have some different teams into the fold. But at the end of the day, the championship, sometimes it just feels right to have the two best teams in the league competing against each other for the title. And I think this is going to be a heavyweight battle for the ages. I really do think that the Dodgers pitching staff has been able to figure it out. They had 33 consecutive scoreless innings, which was a postseason record at some point during this playoff run. And, of course, the pitching staff is always a question mark for L.A. They had a bunch of injuries this year in the rotation, and those pitching injuries have really haunted them in postseasons past, especially with the likes of Clayton Kershaw and the other arms they've had over the years, not getting it done in the playoffs. That was the case last year as well, getting swept by the Diamondbacks in the division series. But the pitching staff totally turned it around at just the right time, and the offense was able to complement them with some run support too. So I think the Dodgers are in really good position to win this series. I think their lineup is just stacked. Again, all the guys I mentioned, Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, Max Muncy as well, everyone in that lineup, Tommy Edman, just hitting phenomenally at this point. And the pitching staff, as good as they've been, it's going to be tough for them to keep that up against the Yankees lineup that has Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. So two of the best batters in the American League, if not the two best batters in the American League. But I think it'll be a fun matchup either way. Again, I love the underdog, but I think having the two best teams in the sport play for the championship just feels right, and it feels like it's a true crowning of the best team in baseball with a matchup like this. So very fun to see these two teams play for the championship. And, of course, the Yankees haven't been to a World Series in 14 years. They're the most successful team in the sport, and they were bound to make the World Series at some point. With all the talent that they have throughout the lineup and the pitching staff, it was bound to happen. The Astros weren't in their way this year. Typically, the Astros are the Yankees' foil in the playoff. But the Astros got knocked out in the first round. The Yankees had a pretty clear path to the World Series from there, and they made the most of it. And you got to respect it. As an Oriole guy, I tip my imaginary cap to the Yankees. I'm hoping for a fun series. This should be a good one in the Fall Classic, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it shakes out. I think a 7-game series is very much in the possibility for the World Series this year. But that's enough talking for me. My voice is very tired, so I'm going to send you off with a farewell this evening on Sports Talk at the Island Green. 2 Monday Night Football matches coming up tonight. The Ravens and the Bucks, the first game, and then another game, too, a doubleheader for you on Monday Night Football. The Cardinals and the Chargers from Glendale, Arizona will be the second in the Twin Bills so far this evening. So 2 good games on the docket for Monday Night Football. Be sure to watch those. And the World Series, of course, starting this week. Super fun matchup again, as I just mentioned. So lots of things happening in the sports world. I won't keep you from watching it. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Thanks, of course, to Skyler Fultz, my guest as always, for coming on to talk some McDaniel football. And Trystin O'Brien, the head booster for the Boosters Club at Century High School. Thanks very much to her for coming on as well. Talk a little Century sports. Great episode as always. We've got another great one coming up for you next week on Sports Talk at the Island Green. Signing off, I'm Avery Newport saying good night. We'll see you next week.